Okay, Ecotopians, we're starting to learn a lot about ecosystems and Ecotopia, and today we're going to talk about trophic levels and food webs. Before we go there, ask yourself, what do we know so far about ecosystems? Well, I'm giving you a hint. First, all organisms need, well, they need two things. What do they need? Right, I think they need energy and they need nutrients. Okay, energy, how does energy enter ecosystems? Through the equation of life on Earth, photosynthesis. And how do nutrients enter ecosystems? Well, either through the atmosphere, through photosynthesis, that is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen are taken in by photosynthesis, or nitrogen is fixed by microbes, and that's how they enter ecosystems in a usable form. Or they enter through the rock cycle as rocks weather other nutrients such as phosphorus enter ecosystems that way. Okay, and also energy is going, I think I've got a question for you here. Well, I'll get back to that. I just wanted to make the point that these things, the idea that energy enters and moves through ecosystems and nutrient cycle, can be very dry, but you can look at any living thing on the planet and think of it in terms of energy flowing through it and nutrients entering and cycling within ecosystems. So just there's so much incredible, miraculous beauty in biology, in ecosystems. And just for example, I'm showing these emperor penguins. Now these guys, if you've seen the famous movie March of the Penguins, you'll know that the males of this species spend the entire Antarctic winter without feeding with an egg on top of their feet. The whole winter in Antarctica, outside without a blanket or a house or anything, in the cold with an egg on their foot. That is an amazing thing. And just imagine how it must feel to these guys after that long winter. They turn over the care of their babies to their wives for a little while, and then they jump in the ocean where they again can fly as fast as anything and feed, and how wonderful it must be for these guys. As energy is flowing through them and nutrients as well. So that's kind of my preamble to this part of the course. And it's not just penguins, it's everything, every living organisms. Our redwood trees, the focus of this class, energy entering these guys, nutrients flowing in through the roots or coming in from the atmosphere, butterflies. This actually is my daughter, one of them, and she is making chocolate in Ecuador. We gathered chocolate pods and we took the seeds out, and she is roasting them right now. And so chocolate too obeys the equation of life on Earth, and the nutrients in chocolate are soon to be going through my daughter and the rest of the family. Also, there's wood down here. This wood here is glowing red. It's because it's giving off the energy that it once stored up from photosynthesis, and it's helping us cook food. In this carbon dioxide and hydrogen and oxygen that's locked up in this wood is being liberated back into the atmosphere as it burns. Okay, so this thing, the equation of life on Earth, you can view the entire world in a new way just by thinking of it. That's why it's called the equation of life on Earth. Okay, anyway, today we are talking about trophic levels. So here we go. All organisms on Earth are either producers or consumers, and we need to define what these are. So producers produce stored energy via photosynthesis. So these are plants, right? Plants produce stored energy via photosynthesis. What they do is they take in carbon dioxide and water, and with light and the magic of photosynthesis create sugar, which once they make a sugar, they can create starch and wood, and we can eat them, and we have that energy. That energy can be transferred to us. So plants, of course, are producers, but there are other organisms too I just wanted to mention besides plants that are also producers. So there are some bacteria that also can do photosynthesis, and I'll show you a picture of some soon, and some other bacteria which I want to talk about that produce stored energy in another way outside of the equation of life on Earth. They're just kind of cool, and I would feel bad about teaching this course and not mentioning them briefly. So here is this is a terrible algal bloom in some lake somewhere, and sometimes when too many nutrients get into water, it allows photosynthetic bacteria and other algae to over reproduce, and it forms a green scum, and it's really bad for water. One of the guys that does this is called cyanobacteria, which tends to get a bad name, including around here in summertime. Some of our rivers in summertime get a lot of nutrients in them, and whether that's from fertilizer from pot plantations or just low water and warm temperatures, I'm not quite sure. I'm not sure if that's been adequately researched. It's a difficult subject to research. But the cyanobacteria are photosynthetic, so you get this green scum. So that's not plants technically, but we got photosynthesis going on there, so that's why I'm mentioning it. And this is the other thing I wanted to mention, hydrothermal undersea vents. So undersea in the oceans there are some hot springs, and they tend to be really deep, and they're scattered in various locations around the globe. And scientists have discovered that there's a thriving ecosystem in these areas in which there's bacteria that can do a form of the equation of life on Earth that does not require light energy. Instead, they're using, let's see, I'm not sure, I guess heat energy from the hot springs, and as well as the dissolved iron, I think that's in there. Anyway, these bacteria are able to store energy, and once they're doing that, they become food for other creatures, and there's this whole ecosystem of sea anemones and these weird worm things, or like barnacles and crabs and so forth, that live down there, never needing sunlight. So it's just an odd little quirky part of life on Earth. Has nothing to do with Ecotopia. So we'll move on. So again, producers produce stored energy via photosynthesis, whereas consumers eat producers. They consume things. They eat producers, or they eat other consumers, or they eat dead stuff. So basically, consumers are all the organisms that are not producers. They come in different kinds. So kinds of consumers include, starting with, you all know, herbivores. Okay, herbivores eat plants. Herbivores are also known as primary consumers. So we're thinking of producers and consumers. So herbivores are consumers. We're going to call them primary consumers. This one with a zero around it means primary. Okay, so those are the first consumers of producers. Okay, hope that makes sense. Now we're going to go on to other kind of consumers that maybe don't eat plants. So, whoops. Okay, I'll give you some example. Here is a primary consumer. This cow here eats plants. Here is a tattoo of another primary consumer. This is a bird and a producer here, which is a plant, I guess, and the hummingbird is eating the plant stuff, and so that makes the hummingbird a primary consumer. And here is an aquatic primary consumer. I think that's some kind of a catfish that eats algae off of aquaria, and probably in its native habitat. It's eating producers, so that makes it a primary consumer. And of course, insects. Many insects eat plants, and so they are also primary consumers. Okay. Boy, that tattoo looks pretty good now, but you wait till you get to be my age. Okay. You can tell them, but do they listen? Secondary consumers. Okay, so we got our primary consumers are the herbivores, and now let's look at secondary consumers. Secondary consumers. These guys are predators of herbivores. So if you eat an herbivore, you are a secondary consumer. Here's some examples. Well, let's take a look at the fox first. Fox looks like it's got rabbit. Rabbit's an herbivore. You, fox, are a primary consumer. No, secondary consumer. And these guys are also predators, but it gets a little bit complicated here, guys, because look, this bird is eating a crayfish. You have to ask, what does this crayfish eat? I don't really know what crayfish eat. They're either filter feeders or herbivores, but I don't think they're primary consumers. So that makes you not eating an herbivore, you're eating something else. And this praying mantis is eating a fly. What does a fly normally eat? Dead plants and poop. dead plants. Not sure if that counts as a plant. This guy is going to eat seals, I guess, maybe other things. What do seals eat? Fish. So a seal is a kind of a predator. So this is a predator of a predator. Anyway, we're going to come back to this in a second. So I'm going to go back one slide and just remind you that I'm looking for predators of herbivores so I can call them secondary consumers. And I liked calling this fox a secondary consumer, but I'm uncomfortable with these. Like I said, we'll come back to this issue in a second. Then there are the omnivores. Omnivores, which eat herbivores, are secondary consumers. And so I think I got some pictures of some omnivores here. Yeah, bears are highly omnivorous. They eat a lot of vegetable matter and not as much meat as you might consume or expect. Ravens, of course. I don't know if you've ever watched ravens. I have. They eat practically everything. So do pigs, as you probably know. And here's my boy, Isaac. He is an omnivore. He's actually a vegetarian, but since he eats milk and cheese and eggs and fish, he lands, as I do, in the omnivorous category. Thirdly, the third kind of secondary consumer might be a parasite of an herbivore. Okay, let's take a look at them. Well, let's not. Who wants to look at parasites? Yuck. Let's look at the picture of this beautiful tropical island instead. But you can imagine they parasite on an herbivore like a tick on a deer. That would be a parasite of an herbivore, so that would make it a secondary consumer. Okay, got it? Hope so. Okay, so those things that are consumers of predators, they're more steps removed from herbivores, the primary consumers. So we're just going to lump them all into a category called higher order consumers. So let's take a look at these guys again. So this crayfish, if it's eating detritus, then it makes this bird a higher order consumer. If this shark here is eating a seal, which eats a salmon, which eats some other fish, we'll call it a higher level consumer. Okay, so basically that's all you need to know. Also, I just want you to appreciate how complicated trophic levels can sometimes be. We're going to build on that by looking at this example of a higher order consumer. Let's think of a polar bear. Okay, what do polar bear eat? Well, lots of things, but I know that they eat a lot of seals. What does a seal eat? Well, actually, seals eat a lot of things. I guess maybe they would eat salmon. Sure. What does salmon eat? Salmon eat little fish. Okay, a smaller fish. What's a smaller fish eat? Well, maybe smaller fish, and maybe the smallest fish eats this stuff called zooplankton. Zooplankton are like little tiny shrimps and little swimming animals in the water, kind of like insects. And what does the zooplankton eat? Well, other zooplankton. It's a crazy food web down there. And eventually, we're going to get to phytoplankton. Phytoplankton are floating photosynthetic organisms, so little algae and such. So here's our plant guys. Here's our primary producer, primary consumer, higher level consumers going all the way up to polar bear. Okay, so polar bear is a good example of a higher order consumer, and I hope that you can think of some others, just thinking about the animals you know and what you know about what they eat. Okay, this, by the way, is an example of a food chain being kind of a link from organism, a feeding link between organisms. So you are feed him, which feeds her, which feeds them, which feeds them, which feeds them, which feeds them. Just you could draw a line from organism to organism, and that would be a food chain. So make sure you understand the meaning of that term, food chain. Okay, we're getting there, but we're not done yet. So, well, look, we've looked at food chains and feeding relationships, trophic levels, but one thing we really need to pay attention to is the fact that all organisms, they shed body parts, they poo, they pee, and they die. And what happens to all that stuff? Well, let's see, since I'm artistic here, I insert an image of shed antlers, fur, and placenta here. Yuck. Poo there, pee there. Okay, maybe I'll do that later. I didn't really want to do that for you. You can imagine that. Okay, there's stuff out there, and it doesn't just stay there. What happens to it? Well, this brings us to the last trophic level, the decomposers. So decomposers decompose stuff. They break down dead stuff, or it's no longer living stuff, whether it was a whole organism that died or just a part of it that shed, or whether it's poo or pee. If you were to get into this more deeply than we need to for this class, you would make a distinction between decomposers and detritivores. I'm not going to do that. We don't need to do that. But I just also wanted to point out that typically decomposers are not considered consumers. So they're thought of as a third class. We would have our producers, our consumers, and our decomposers. I personally don't like that because I think that decomposition is a form of consumption, but I just want to let you know that's the way the scientific world thinks about them, as decomposers are separate from consumers and producers. I happen to know a lot about these guys because I did graduate work in mycology, the study of fungi, and most fungi, not all, but many of them are decomposers, and they're very important decomposers in the forest community. And I just wanted to show you a couple of really cool things that I saw recently. My wife and I were hiking in Redwood National Park over spring break, and we saw this amazing sight I wanted to share with you, and then I'll show you this TED Talk on the subject. So let's look at the amazing thing that we saw. Along our pathway for about a mile on every moist surface in the park, we saw these things. And what are they? They are millipedes. Millions and millions of millipedes, all just creeping slowly on every wet surface. It was really creepy, and I guess that's a pun, but I don't really feel like laughing about it because it was really creepy, and I don't get creeped out that easily. There were so many of these. I'll focus here. You see that? Make sure you've got high resolution so you can see this. Yikes. Okay, lots and lots of millipedes. I'm serious. We walked for about a mile on this trail and every surface was covered with these guys. I would not want to lie down and not move for very long. Millipedes are decomposers. They eat dead stuff. I talked to a park ranger who thought that this was probably a hatch of some sort. Okay, they hatch and they do this. There are a lot of millipedes in the redwood forest. They must be very important decomposers. That is, they decompose a lot of the stuff that's out there. I mean, it just kept going and going. Okay, next thing I want to show is this TED Talk. Wow, where'd you go? Here you are. Dead stuff. Oh man, where the heck did it go? No. Okay, here it is. It's kind of weird. I'm showing a YouTube of a YouTube. I think it'll be okay. I've got my high definition on here, so I'll try to post the link in case you don't want to listen to it here in this this presentation. You can watch it separately, but this will take 4 more minutes, so listen up.
If someone called you scum, you'd probably be offended. But scientifically, they might not be far off. Have you ever thought about where your food comes from? You might say it comes from plants, animals, or even fungi, but you'd probably rather not think about the rotting organisms and poop that feed those plants, animals, and fungi.
No.
So really, you and most of the matter in your body are just 2 or 3 degrees of separation from things like pond scum. All species in an ecosystem, from the creatures in a coral reef, to the fish in a lake, to the lions on the savanna, are directly or indirectly nourished by dead stuff. Most of the organic matter in our bodies, if we trace it back far enough, comes from CO2 and water through photosynthesis.
Oh yeah.
Plants use the energy from sunlight to transform carbon dioxide and water from the environment into glucose and oxygen. That glucose is then transformed into more complex organic molecules to form leaves, stems, roots, fruit, and so on. The energy stored in these organic molecules supports the food chains with which we're familiar. You've probably seen illustrations like this, or this. These green food chains start with living plants at their base. But in real-life terrestrial ecosystems, less than 10% of plant matter is eaten while it's still alive.
All right. Now, since I know that 7 out of 5 people have trouble with fractions in math in general, what did he say? Only 10% of what? Let's listen to that again.
10% of plant matter is eaten while it's still alive.
10% of plant matter is eaten while it's still alive. Well, goody for the plants. I mean, how much of you is eaten while you're still alive? Much less than 10%, but those poor plants, they get munched on. 10%. Okay, so what? Well, there's 90% of the plant that ultimately must be decomposed, otherwise we'd end up drowning in plant matter. So what's up with that? That's where they're going.
What about the other 90? Well, just look at the ground on an autumn day. Living plants shed dead body parts, fallen leaves, broken branches, and even underground roots. Many plants are lucky enough to go their whole lives without being eaten, eventually dying and leaving remains. All of these uneaten, undigested, and dead plant parts, that 90% of terrestrial plant matter, that becomes detritus, the base of what we call the brown food chain, which looks more like this. What happens to plants also happens to all other organisms up the food chain. Some are eaten alive, but most are eaten only when they're dead and rotting. And all along this food chain, living things shed organic matter and expel digestive waste before dying and leaving their remains to decay.
Don't show it.
All that death sounds grim, right? But it's not. All detritus is ultimately consumed by microbes and other scavengers, so it actually forms the base of the brown food chain that supports many other organisms, including us. Scientists are learning that this detritus is an unexpectedly huge energy source, fueling most natural ecosystems. But the interactions within an ecosystem are even more complex than that.
Ooh.
What a food chain really represents is a single pathway of energy flow.
Food chain.
And within any ecosystem, many of these flows are linked together to form a rich network of interactions, or food web.
Food web.
With dead matter supporting that network at every step. The resulting food web is so connected that almost every species is no more than 2 degrees from detritus, even us humans. You probably don't eat rotting things, poop, or pond scum directly, but your food sources probably do. Many animals we eat either...
All right. Pâté forestier. Pork-based pâté with mushrooms and black truffles, so fungi. Escargot, yes, snails are decomposers. Coq au vin, what's that? And chicken, mushroom. Quiche aux champignons, mushroom. Homard l'américain, lobster. Lobsters are bottom feeders. Bouillabaisse, fish soup. So if that's made from catfish, bottom feeders, 2 degrees of separation.
feed directly on detritus themselves, like pork, poultry, mushrooms, shellfish, or catfish and other bottom feeders. Or they're fed animal byproducts. So if you're thinking that nature is full of waste, you're right. But one organism's garbage is another's gold. And all that rotting dead stuff ultimately provides the energy that nourishes us and most of life on Earth as it passes through the food web. Now that's some food for thought.
All right. They always have to end on some corny pun. Okay, great. So let's go back to this and finish up here. Okay. So, details, more details. That is, details, let's look more deeply into what goes on in the equation of life on Earth, what happens on Earth as this energy and nutrients flow through it. So, remember the food chain. The polar bear eats all this stuff. All the food chains together in a community are called a food web, which the TED guy was talking about. He showed us the brown food chain and showed us how complicated an ecosystem can be just through its food web. So I wanted to show you a picture of a real food web that someone tried to reconstruct. This is somebody done. At this link here I found had a picture of a food web. Now, these are, every dot is a species, and the producers are green. 1, 2, not many producers. So in this place where Estero de Punta Banda in Baja California, it's the Bay of point something in Baja, they must have done a very good study. This is really hard to do because you have to know all these organisms. The non-parasitic consumers are in red. So these are the consumers, either the herbivores or predators, and then the parasites in blue. And every line is a link, a feeding link, a trophic link between species. So you can see this green plant here is fed on by only 3 species. This one is fed on by many species. And pretty soon you can see how complex the food web is. That's the point I wanted to make. The other point I wanted to emphasize is the same thing. It's just pretty complicated. Food webs are fantastic. But remember, you can view all of this through the lens of the equation of life on Earth. And so all the energy in this system is entering these green guys, and then it's flowing to everybody else throughout. As are the nutrients. By and large, all the nutrients in the bodies of all these organisms arises in the plants and moves on through them. So that's fantastic. I am also making a transition here to talk a little bit more about relationships, because this food web is focused on a study of parasites in blue, and that there's actually a lot of parasites in ecosystems. And so I wanted to talk about parasitism and other relationships in ecosystems. So relationships are important in communities, and you might say, yeah, if you're thinking of human communities, for sure, relationships in our communities are very important. Who's the boss? Who's getting along with each other? Who's an enemy? Are you getting along well with your wife? The relationships are important in communities, and also in multi-species communities as well. And so we scientists have another term for relationships, long-term relationships. We call them symbiosis. Now, most people think of symbiosis as a beneficial relationship between species, but it's not necessarily so. So symbiosis is probably not what you thought it was. Here's what we scientists think of symbiosis. Here's the definition: a close and often long-term relationship between 2 or more different species. So not necessarily a beneficial one, as a marriage can be, not necessarily beneficial, although one should hope. Okay, so here's the code I want you to think. If there's a plus here, it means beneficial. So for instance, in this relationship here, we have 2 organisms and they both benefit from the relationship. Minus means harm is being done to that species. So in this case, this species is benefiting and this species is being harmed. And a 0 means it's neither being beneficial nor harmed. So in this case, we have a benefit, whereas the other species, nothing's happening to it. Okay, so we have all these possible combinations of pluses and minuses, and they have special terms associated with them. All of these are symbioses. 1 symbiosis, is, 2 symbioses, es. Okay, so all of these are examples of symbioses, and let's get the names right. So if they both benefit, that is called a mutualism. I'll show you an example in a second. If one benefits and the other is harmed, that could be either herbivory, or it could be carnivory, or it could be parasitism. Usually in ecology classes they focus on parasitism here because we have a long-term relationship of 2 species, of 2 individuals of 2 species, and one is always parasitizing the other, whereas herbivory and carnivory can be short-term. So a plus and 0 means one's benefiting and the other is neither being benefited nor harmed, and that's called commensalism. Commensalism. I'm benefiting, and the other guy's like, I don't care, nothing, doesn't harm me, doesn't help me. Where you're being harmed and the other one, I don't know what that is. If they're both being harmed together, that's called competition. And if they're both being harmed by the other, that's called competition. And if neither is being harmed or helped by the other, that's called amensalism. For the purposes of this course, I will ignore amensalism and I will ignore this hypothetical situation and focus in, we will hold you responsible for mutualism, these guys, commensalism, and competition. And just some examples of these. Here's a mutualism. There's a crocodile, and it's benefiting from having his teeth cleaned. I guess it's harmful for any animal to have dead meat stuck between its teeth. And these birds are benefiting by getting free food. Okay, parasitism. What can I tell you, guys? I just don't like parasites. So imagine for yourself a tick or a parasitic worm or something like that. Commensalism. So here's a case where this elephant presumably is neither benefited nor harmed by these cattle egrets, but these guys are waiting for him to take a dump, and then they're going to pick all the bugs and parasites and eggs and yummy stuff out of it. Okay, so they're benefiting from this guy. He's neither benefiting nor being harmed. And then here's a good example of interspecific competition where two species are competing, probably in this case over a food source. Although that's usually where you see interspecific competition is over food sources. Although it may also sometimes be territory. I've seen nesting birds compete. Different species of birds compete for nesting sites. And there may be other kinds of competition as well. Anyway, so familiarize yourself with these four terms: mutualism, parasitism, commensalism, and competition, and understand that they are all different kinds of symbiosis. Okay, wanted to show you an invasive species. Oh, I know why I wanted to show you this. Let's just talk about English ivy. I hate English ivy. English ivy is an invasive species. It's not native to North America. It was introduced, and after it introduced, it just went crazy. It went nuts. It grows very rapidly and kills trees. It threatens redwoods nearby here, and I've seen it. Go to Portland sometime. One of our classmates is in Portland, and you should go, if you haven't already. Just pay attention to English ivy. It's nasty. And the idea, there's a question: why is it that some species that are introduced go nuts and others don't? Many species are introduced and they don't become invasive and they don't harm other communities, but some do. And the prevailing current hypothesis is that when these species are introduced, they are not introduced along with all the parasites that are on them in the home country. And so without that parasitic load, they are able to grow very rapidly, and they do. Nothing around here eats English ivy for some reason. I don't know why. And but that's the case. Whereas back in the old world, I guess, there must be some parasite or some competitive interaction that holds it back. So this is an example of a species which has been removed from a former symbiosis, that is a parasitic symbiosis, and it results in explosive growth and invasive growth and has a big impact, and in many cases has had huge impacts on communities and ecosystems. And this is a preview of what we're going to talk about next in this class, which in talking about plant communities, we will talk about disturbance and change over time. And that's an important component of understanding communities and ecosystems, and we'll talk about that soon. In the meantime, we are all done, so I just wanted to summarize what I hope you have learned in this lecture. That never forget the equation of life on Earth. I'm serious. I'm going to be repeating it till the end of the semester and beyond. So make sure you got the EOLOE. In ecosystems, energy blanks through and nutrients blank. What do you think that means? In ecosystems, energy flows through, nutrients cycle. Trophic levels refers to the position an organism occupies in a food chain. Organisms can be either producers or consumers. Consumers come in 3 or 4 varieties. The 3 varieties are herbivores, also known as primary consumers; secondary consumers, which include predators, omnivores, and parasites; and higher level consumers, which prey on predators, omnivores, and or parasites; and decomposers, which are usually considered separate from consumers. Okay, and then all the feeding relationships in a community are called a food web. So make sure you understand the concept of a food chain, and also the food web. They are related but different. Make sure you can distinguish the two. And a long-term relationship between species, that is called, all of them, long-term relationships between species are called symbioses, and these include mutualism, parasitism, commensalism, and competition. Okay, thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next lecture.